Namaskar. In this segment, I am going to do Purva Paksha of Arundhati Vasishtha observation. Mahabharata text has more than 200 astronomy chronology observations, and they can be used to determine, in principle, timing of Mahabharata War. There are more than 130 efforts to figure out the timing of Mahabharata War, and out of that, more than 50% of those efforts claim to have employed astronomy evidence to determine their proposal for the timing of Mahabharata War. What I want to do is go through few researchers who have at least acknowledged the presence of Arundhati Vasishtha observation or AV observation. I say that because out of these 60 independent Mahabharata researchers, only few, I would say around 6 Mahabharata researchers even acknowledge this observation. Second adhyay of the Bhishma Purva of Mahabharata text has 4 astronomy observations, and one of the 4 astronomy observations from this adhyay is that of AV observation or Arundhati Vasishtha observation. What you are seeing on the screen is a cutout from this second adhyay, and it includes shlok for all the 4 astronomy observations. For example, shlok number 23. Alaksha prabhayahina purnamasi cha kartikem chandrodbhut agnivarnascha padmavarne navastale. Then shlok number 32. Rohini pidayannesha stito rajan shaneschara vyavrutta lakshma somasya bhavishyati mahadbhayam. These 2 shlok has total of 3 astronomy observations. We will not go into their details. The last, 4th and the most critical observation is shlok number 31. Ya chaisha vishruta rajas trailokye sadhu sammata Arundhati tatha pesha Vasishtha prushtata kruta. Now there are, as I said, more than 60 Mahabharata researchers who claim to have used astronomy evidence of the Mahabharata text to arrive at their own proposal for the timing of Mahabharata War. All of them refer to 3 of the 4 astronomy observations of this adhyay, but majority of them simply do not say anything about the Arundhati Vasishtha observation. And we should wonder why. Of course, all we would be doing is guessing. Having said that, I can tell you with the confidence that the reason they dare not refer to this Arundhati Vasishtha observation while referring to rest of the 3 observations of this adhyay is because they were at loss. They did not know what to do with this observation. What we will do next is look at the efforts and work of few Mahabharata researchers who at least acknowledge this observation. So let us look at how they interpreted this observation and what was the outcome of their interpretation. Let us begin with the work of Bharatacharya C.V. Vaidya. Lokmanya Bal Gangadhar Tilak gave him this title of Bharatacharya for his deep work on the subject of Mahabharata. The title of the book is The Mahabharata, a Criticism. He published it in 1905, and he does refer to this Arundhati Vasishtha observation. Let us see the context in which he refers to it. In his word, he says, "We on our part believe that most of these references are of doubtful authenticity. In other words, that they do not belong to the original Mahabharata of Vyasa, but to its latest edition." He further says, it will be admitted by all that some of them are fanciful and absurd. Now, to illustrate his point, he quotes this Arundhati Vasishtha observation. He says, for instance, take this observation of Arundhati and Vasishtha. And what he says is, the last editor probably wished to accumulate the number of the evil omens which preceded the war and tried to put it in such impossible combination as he could bring them together. So, astronomically speaking, Vaidya sees no possibility of Arundhati walking ahead of Vasishtha ever being true. And naturally, he doesn't know how to even test for it, but he doesn't see that as a possibility. So, where comes the question of testing it? Another researcher, Bharat Ratna and Mahamahopadhyay, Panduranga Vaman Kane, P.V. Kane, he also refers to this Arundhati Vasishtha observation. He wrote a 5-volume study on the history of Dharma Shastra. And in volume 3 of this series, there is a significant discussion on the timing of Mahabharata War. Now, what is his take on the Arundhati Vasishtha observation? It is similar to what C.V. Vaidya thought of this observation. P.V. Kane writes, the author or authors of the Mahabharata, in describing the evil portents of an impending tragic or catastrophic event, often assemble together number of observations, all of them irrespective of the fact whether some of them are possible in the very order of nature. Thus, Kane also thinks of this observation as a non-testable observation. In 2006, Professor Arun Ayyangar published a research paper in the Indian Journal of History of Science. And in this paper, he does mention Arundhati Vasishtha observation. It is very interesting and funny how he combines one line of this Arundhati Vasishtha observation with another line from another chapter of Bhishma Purva. So let me show it to you. This is what he did. He took one line of this AV observation, Arundhati Tatha Pesha Vasishtha Prashtata Krata, which is Bhishma Purva, Adhyay 2 and Shlok 31. And he combines with one of the two lines of another shlok from the third Adhyay of Bhishma Purva, which is the second line that you see here, Dhruva Prajvalito Goram Apasavya Pravartate. He does not tell us what was his rationale, why it was okay to do something like this, what was the outcome of this research. Obviously, he wrote a paper on it, and I will encourage all of you to read the paper in the original. All I want to just make a point is that there is no rationale, there is no good reasoning to do such combination. In any case, his translation is below. Arundhati has gone ahead of Vasishtha, and Dhruva, the pole star blazing and fierce, is moving anti-clockwise. Another researcher, Dieter Koch, he wrote a book on the astronomical dating of the Mahabharata War in German and then translated it into English sometime around 2014-2015. He does mention the Arundhati Vasishtha observation. He also gives the translation. And then something funny. He says, for the moment, information on Arundhati and Vasishtha will be overlooked. Now, that is fine, except he never comes back to explaining this Mahabharata astronomy observations in the rest of his book, and still goes on to propose some date for the timing of Mahabharata War. I want to discuss another work. The book is by Shri Ramesh Panchwagh, and the title of the book is A Scientific Study for the Astronomical Proof of Mahabharata. And this was published in April 2011, so that was a few months, 4 months before I published my When Did the Mahabharata War Happen? The Mystery of Arundhati. And in this book, when it comes to AV observation, now he does quote the shlok that we went through. Shaisha Vishruta Rajastrailoke Sadhu Sanmata Arundhati Tatha Pesha Vasishtha Prushtata Kruta. And in his explanation, this is what he writes. The translation first. O king, even the Arundhati, well known in the three worlds, is now ahead of Vasishtha. So far so good. Now, as an explanation, he writes this, and I should mention the year he is proposing for the timing of Mahabharata War. He is proposing 3126 BCE as the timing of Mahabharata War. His explanation for Arundhati Vasishtha observation is extremely juvenile. And eventually, when I get to explaining the epoch of Arundhati and when Arundhati would have appeared walking ahead of Vasishtha, why did Arundhati walked ahead of Vasishtha, you will understand why this is extremely simplistic, juvenile, wrong explanation for Arundhati. It's laughable. Anyways, the explanation is this. The star cluster of the Great Dipper is known as Saptarshis, 7 sages. One of the stars on its handle, Mizar, is considered as sage Vasishtha. The small star, Alcor, is considered as Arundhati, Vasishtha's wife, who seemed to go ahead of Vasishtha. So far so good. This is all good explanation. Now, Mr. Panchwagh writes, he says, Alcor's motion is faster than Mizar. Now that is completely wrong, but let's move on. And then he says, at some time in the past, it must have been behind the Mizar. We will leave the discussion of this book at this stage, but it is one of the effort which does mention AV observation, and I thought I will bring it to your attention. And finally, I want to bring to your attention one more researcher and his work who refers to Arundhati Vasishtha observation. That researcher is Dr. Padmakar Vishnu Varthak, Dr. P.V. Varthak. He wrote a book initially in Marathi. The title is Swayambhu. He wrote this book in 1971, and since then he has published many editions of this book. Every time he added more information as his research work continued. And in this book, he mentions in 2 places about this Arundhati Vasishtha observation. Now, he tried to test this observation to see under what circumstances Arundhati would have appeared to walk ahead of Vasishtha. He tested in 3 different ways, but he did not succeed. But in the true spirit of a researcher, because he did understand the critical importance of this observation, he requested other researchers and other astronomers to study this further. I'm going to read 2 passages from his book. They are in Marathi. So the latest edition that I have, and this is on page 189, After discussing Saptarshi, then he states, खगोलशास्त्रज्ञांना माझी एक विनंती आहे की त्यांनी सप्तर्षीतील अरुंधती या ताऱ्यांच्या हालचालीचा अभ्यास करावा. कारण भीष्म पर्व अध्याय 2 येथे महाभारतात व्यास म्हणतात, अरुंधती आपला पती वसिष्ठ याला मागे टाकून पुढे गेली आहे. अरुंधतीच्या हालचालीचा अभ्यास केला तर या विधानाची सत्यता पडताळून पाहता येईल व महाभारताचा काल निश्चित करता येईल. सध्या अरुंधती 6व्या ताऱ्याजवळ दिसते. पूर्वी ती 7व्या ताऱ्याजवळ होती की काय अशी शंका येते. पूर्वी 7व्या ताऱ्याच्या मागे असलेली अरुंधती हळूहळू सरकत आता 6व्या जवळ आली असेल का? पूर्वी 7व्या ताऱ्याला वसिष्ठ म्हणत होते की काय? इत्यादी इत्यादी. अरुंधती वसिष्ठाभोवती फेऱ्या मारते की काय? सप्तर्षीचा व अरुंधतीचा विचार त्यातील तज्ञांनी जरूर करावा व महाभारताच्या कालनिर्णयाला सहाय्य करावे. He wrote this in 1971. Same time, he also added one appendix in his book on this Saptarshi motion, and also there also he refers to this AV observation. And I will read another small clip from his book. Again, it is in Marathi. भारतीय खगोलतज्ञांनी अरुंधतीच्या गतीचा व हालचालीच्या दिशेचा नीट अभ्यास करावा. त्या अभ्यासाची वसिष्ठाच्या हालचालीशी सांगड घालावी. म्हणजे किती हजार वर्षापूर्वी अरुंधती वसिष्ठाच्या मागे होती व किती हजार वर्षापूर्वी ती वसिष्ठाच्या बरोबर आली ते गणिताने काढता येईल. साहजिकच महाभारताचा कालही निश्चित होईल. Now this is the book that was published in March 2012. Now he has also published its English translation. The translation is the name, instead of keeping the same name as Swayambhu, he has translated the title as well as Sui Generis. This book was published in September 2012, and it has the translation of those same paragraphs. Essentially what he's saying there, the passages that I read in Marathi, is that he's requesting astronomers to study this Arundhati Vasishtha observation further and thus assist in determining the timing of Mahabharata War. Now, to my pleasant surprise, in this English translation, he does mention about my work. Now, when I published my book in 2011, I did send him a copy. I have met him on few occasions. In fact, every time I get a chance to visit India, and if I also get a chance to visit Pune, I do make a point to visit Dr. Varthak. I'll read a small clip that is included in this English translation. It reads, I requested the astronomers to work on this project. By this project, he is referring to Arundhati Vasishtha observation. But nobody worked till 2011. Mr. Nilesh O first worked on my concept and successfully shown this to be the case in 2011. He found out that Arundhati had really gone ahead of Vasishtha in the period from 4500 BCE to 11,000 BCE. So that summarizes work of those Mahabharata researchers who even bothered to acknowledge this AV observation. And as a quick summary, number of them interpreted this observation as something that is impossible in the very order of nature. Others mention it and did not do anything about it. Some people had extremely simplistic understanding, or rather misunderstanding, of what this observation is all about. And then finally, Dr. Varthak did recognize the importance of this observation, did make multiple attempts to test it, but did not succeed. So that is in summary the Purva Paksha of Arundhati Vasishtha observation.